Hello, I'm Shannon Chiesi from the Diplomat, and I'm here today at the Brookings Institution, where I'm joined by Dr. Jonathan Pollack. Dr. Pollack is a senior fellow here at the John L. Thornton China Center at Brookings. U.S. President Barack Obama has just completed a tour of 4 different countries in Asia. He started in Japan, then headed to South Korea, Malaysia, and the Philippines. I'm here with Dr. Pollack to discuss the regional and global implications of this trip. Thanks for joining us, Dr.
Thank you.
Pollack. As a sort of a background, could you just let us know in your mind what you think the overarching goals of this trip were?
Well, I think it varied from country to country, but in overall terms, it was to put some more specific meaning to the idea that the president has a particular focus and interest in Asia in the long term, and I think he tried to impart that in each of his stops along the way. At the same time, part of this trip was kind of like a make-up exam, since it reflected a canceled trip last fall that would have taken him to Malaysia and the Philippines on that trip. So in this measure, visiting both Northeast Asia and Southeast Asia, but doing this apart from any of the multilateral fora that often take him to the Asia-Pacific region. So for all of those reasons, it's making a statement. Presidential time is a very, very valuable commodity, and he had a lot of work to do.
And one of his top priorities for this trip was to help push forward the Trans-Pacific Partnership, a multilateral trade organization that they're trying to negotiate. Unfortunately, it didn't seem like he was able to make a real breakthrough with that, particularly in discussions with Japan.
Right.
How do you think this is going to affect momentum for the TPP moving forward?
Well, this is one of the big unresolved or incomplete aspects of this trip. I suspect that the president expected to get more than he got in Japan, but it's clear that Japan remains deeply divided on questions related to the affiliation with this kind of a high-quality trade agreement. These issues go back a long, long way with Japan. It's nothing all that recent, and yet we can see that there are large sectors of the Japanese economy that still remain largely walled off to imports, and as he made it clear in his public remarks, any kind of an agreement here would have to fulfill those kinds of expectations to enable American companies to compete fully and fairly here. So the fact that he did not reach closure on TPP clearly is going to impose some serious obstacles going ahead, both with respect to not only TPP, but also getting the trade promotional authority from the Congress that he needs to move ahead quickly here. So I suspect he would regard that as probably the biggest disappointment of the trip. We'll see whether or not this can be concluded quickly or not. Some in Japan say that it can, others say that it cannot, but it is ongoing.
The other big news from from Obama's stop in Japan was that Obama officially declared that the disputed Senkaku Diaoyu Islands would be covered under the U.S.-Japan Mutual Defense Treaty. And we've heard this proclamation before, but never at the presidential level.
Right,
Do you think this is going to have a lasting effect on the China-Japan disputes?
Well, I don't know if it's going to have a lasting effect on the China-Japan dispute. It certainly has had a near-term effect in both China and Japan. Chinese are obviously unhappy about it. I think it's important to bear in mind that the actual statement that the Article 5 provision of the U.S.-Japan Mutual Security Treaty would apply here is not news. I mean, in a way, it's stating a basic fact. And the president was not committing himself to specific courses of action if things should become unsettled. So he gave himself some wiggle room, if you will. More than that, from his public remarks, he made it clear that the expectation that the United States has of restraint applies equally to Japan and to China. It's not a pointing at just one or the other. So I think that he felt that under the circumstances, this was a declaration that he wanted to make. He may even have calculated that it was going to give him added help in the TPP negotiations. But I think in a case like this, he has to judge it on its own merits, not try to play two orchestrated a political game, if you will, because it has important implications, no doubt, but at some level, it's really stating a fact. It's simply, though, that, as you pointed out, it's never been stated so explicitly at the presidential level before.
Well, let's move on to Obama's stop in South Korea, where obviously one of the major points of focus was how Seoul and Washington can work together to deal with the threat posed by Pyongyang, North Korea. They presented a united front, but there didn't seem to be any new consensus on different methods to try. What do you think South Korea and the U.S. are going to take as their strategy moving forward?
Right. Well, I think, first of all, it's interesting to note this is President Obama's fourth trip to the Republic of Korea. He's visited South Korea more than he's visited any other country in the world, and he has felt a clear affinity both with President Lee Myung-bak, Park Geun-hye's predecessor, and now, of course, President Park herself. This is an intractable issue. No one is under illusions that there's any easy, straightforward way to proceed. If anything, I think President Obama sought to reinforce his standing policy here, which has been very, very clear that he's not interested in revisiting old bargains when old bargains haven't worked. The dilemma, and he, I think, understands this, is that it leaves North Korea unconstrained, except by, let's say, technical economic means, on how it might proceed ahead with its weapons program. What was interesting here is that President Park made a very, very strong statement, sharp statement, because as we speak right now, and of course when he was there, we do see some evidence of activity at North Korea's nuclear test site. Some of the statements from North Korea are again hinting, sometimes quite openly, at the prospect, not the inevitability, but the quite strong likelihood that there will be another nuclear weapons test or perhaps tests. And it's clear that President Park would view a fourth nuclear test as a very, very consequential development. She put very, very strong emphasis on this, as did her foreign minister in some public remarks that he made. So whether this results in some kind of a shift in emphasis, we don't know, but I think it's fair to say that the two sides no doubt reached concurrence on the idea that if there were a fourth test, there are going to have to be additional sanctions and costs imposed on North Korea, perhaps also with a hope that China might be more fully enlisted in this process as well. So in this case, they're trying to anticipate what could happen, and we don't know for sure whether it will or will not, although the indications are that it will. Whether that's being done for technical reasons or political reasons, we really don't know yet. But it is a long-running saga. Indeed, in some respects, we are now into the third decade of trying to find some kind of a diplomatic means, if possible, to negotiate an end to this program. There's very, very little lasting success to report along the way, and so we are kind of stuck. But I think beyond anything else, President Obama personally has very strong convictions about the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. North Korea is the only country ever to withdraw from the NPT. They're the only country in the world to test a nuclear device or nuclear weapon in the 21st century. So he is very, very sensitive to precedents here, as are, I think, also the South Koreans, rather. But I think he feels it very keenly. And on this basis, our governments do cooperate very, very closely. But the real problem is not eliciting any cooperation from those in the North.
Obama's third stop in Malaysia was, to a certain extent, overshadowed by press coverage of his stops in Japan, South Korea, and later the Philippines. But talk to us for a bit about his stop in Malaysia, why he decided to go there, and what he was hoping to achieve.
I think the United States, both under President Obama and also under President Bush, views Malaysia as an Islamic state, as what a more modern Islamic state could become. It's a very, very prosperous society. It's very, very ethnically diverse in all kinds of ways. That doesn't mean in any measure that it is free from tensions. And indeed, a lot of our issues with Malaysia have more to do with the way politics is conducted there, because you have a very long-standing ruling party which has, shall we say, very, very problematic attitudes toward those in opposition. So it's not exactly as if it is a, if you will, a fully functioning democratic order, to say the least. But I think it was important that Obama felt that, relatively speaking, Malaysia has been a somewhat neglected element in American foreign policy, more generally, diplomacy. He's the first American president since Lyndon Johnson in 1967 to visit Malaysia. That's a long time for a U.S. leader not to visit a country that has some real consequence to it. So I think it was important that he go, and I suspect in some of his private interactions with the Malaysian leadership, he has probably conveyed more deeply some of the U.S. concerns that we have about how politics are conducted in Malaysia. That said, there's a parallel effort to enlist Malaysia much more fully in various activities, both international activities. Malaysia agreed to participate in the Proliferation Security Initiative. That's something in the past they've been a bit wary of doing. So there's clearly forward movement here. And, you know, a lot of these relationships are not necessarily marked by clear or immediate success. As he noted in his press conference in the Philippines yesterday, he's often very, very content, as he put it, to hit singles or doubles rather than thinking every time it's got to be a home run.
Well, to some extent, we could say he did hit a home run in the Philippines, which was probably the site of the single greatest deliverable from this trip, which was the signing of a new extended defense cooperation agreement between the U.S. and the Philippines.
Right.
How is this going to affect military cooperation, especially between the U.S. and the Philippines going forward?
Well, the administration has said that this is the most significant defense agreement with the Philippines in several decades, and that's true. It creates a framework. It creates a more permissive environment within which the United States can facilitate various roles and missions in the Philippines. We have a long and checkered history of the Philippines. Philippines, after all, is the only real colony that the United States ever had. We severed a lot of our ties with the Philippines in the defense area 20 years ago, more than 20 years ago, at the behest of those then running the government there. So there's a lot of nationalism here. So in some sense, perhaps because of Philippines' anxieties about the growing power of China and so forth, they wanted some kind of an assurance that you have a basis on which the United States can proceed ahead to collaborate more actively in a range of areas. Nobody is talking about the recreation of a base structure in the Philippines, but what you are talking about are missions that can facilitate what is really, in many, many respects, a very underdeveloped military. A Filipino official remarking on their Air Force said, well, we have lots of air and no force. So here again, a lot of the missions are related to humanitarian disaster relief, other kinds of so-called non-traditional military missions. But at the same time, many would take this as a signal of trying to give the Philippines some measure of added support, not to take on China, if you will, but at least to give some measure of assurance that the Philippines does not stand alone.
Well, thank you so much for walking us through Obama's trip to Asia. Once again, I'm Shannon Tiezi from The Diplomat. Thanks for watching.